Laudetur Jesus Christus, Vatican and World News.
In the headlines this Tuesday, May 25th, Pope Francis launches the Laudato Si Action platform and asks what kind of world we want to leave to our children. A military assault on a church in Myanmar kills 4 Catholics as the UN warns the country could tip into civil war. And the U.S. Secretary of State visits Israel and the Gaza Strip in hopes of shoring up a recent ceasefire. In the Vatican, I'm Devin Watkins. Pope Francis today sent a video message to launch the new Laudato Si Action platform. The initiative brings the Laudato Si year to a close as the Church continues to battle to protect our common home. In his message, the Pope invited everyone to consider the question, what world do we want to leave to our children? Francesca Merlo reports.
In his video message for the launch of the Laudato Si platform on Tuesday, Pope Francis notes that with the encyclical Laudato Si promulgated in 2015, I invited all people of goodwill to take care of the earth, which is our common home. The Laudato Si Action platform is a 7-year journey that will see our communities committed in different ways to becoming totally sustainable in the spirit of integral ecology. This house that hosts us has been suffering for a long time from the wounds that we caused by our predatory attitude, laments the Pope. He highlights the fact that the current pandemic has now brought to light in an even stronger way the cry of nature and that of the poor who suffer most the consequences, highlighting that everything is interconnected and interdependent and that our health is not separated from the health of the environment in which we live. It is for this reason that we need a new ecological approach, says Pope Francis. In this way we can transform our way of dwelling in the world, our styles of life, our relationship with the resources of the earth, and in general our way of looking at humanity and of living life. We have a great responsibility, continues the Pope, especially with regard to the future generations. What world do we want to leave to our children and our young? Our selfishness, our indifference, and our irresponsible ways are threatening the future of our children, he warns. Pope Francis then goes on to renew his appeal. Let us take care of our Mother Earth. Let us overcome the temptation of selfishness that makes us predators of resources. Let us cultivate respect for the gifts of the earth and creation. Let us inaugurate a lifestyle and a society that is finally eco-sustainable. We have the opportunity to prepare a better tomorrow for all. From God's hands, we have received a garden. We cannot leave a desert to our children, he says. Work together, he stresses, as only in this way we will be able to create the future we want, a more inclusive, fraternal, peaceful and sustainable world. Bringing his message to a close, Pope Francis recalls that there is hope. Working together, he says, each one with his or her own culture and experience, each one with his or her own initiatives and capacities, so that our Mother Earth may be restored to her original beauty and creation may once again shine according to God's plan. I'm Francesca Merlo.
Staying with the story, Cardinal Peter Turkson, the prefect of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, introduced the Laudato Si Action platform this morning at a press conference in the Vatican. 6 years on from the publication of Laudato Si, said Cardinal Turkson, the cry of the earth and of the poor is becoming more and more heartbreaking. He said the message from scientists and young people is increasingly alarming. We are destroying our future. Now more than ever, he said, it is time to act, to do something concrete. Following Cardinal Turkson's introduction, Father Kostrom Kurithadam gave an explanation of the action platform.
It is a journey to realize the integral ecological vision of Laudato Si. As Pope Francis reminds us in the encyclical, we are all interrelated and interdependent, and everyone's talents and involvement are needed to redress the damage caused by human abuse of God's creation. Laudato Si 14. This integral ecological vision demands that we journey together on this mission. So that's the reason we thought of proposing 7 sectors that everyone is involved. Laudato Si Action Platform is a journey towards total sustainability in the spirit of the integral ecology. In order to ensure that we remain faithful to the integral ecological vision of Laudato Si, we are proposing 7 Laudato Si goals. That we respond to the cry of the earth, so the physical dimension, using renewable energy, conserving water, protecting biodiversity. The second goal is that we respond to the cry of the poor, that we keep the poor, the indigenous communities, the migrants, whoever the poor of today are, at the center of this journey. that we create a new ecological paradigm, the third objective. The fourth is that we change our lifestyles at the level of each one of us. And the fifth and the sixth are the two pillars of Laudato Si, ecological education and ecological spirituality. And the seventh objective is that we do all this together. It's only when we respond to all these objectives together that we can really say that we are undertaking the journey of integral ecology.
Thanks there to Father Josh Tadam, the coordinator of the Ecology and Creation section of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. In other news, a Catholic church in Myanmar was shelled by the military early Monday morning, killing 4 people. Catholics were sheltering in the church due to fighting between the military and a local resistance group fighting the army. Robin Gomes has the details.
Sacred Heart Church in Kayan Thaya Parish near Loiko, the capital of Kaya State, a Catholic stronghold, was the target of the attack in the wee hours of May 24th when people were sleeping. 4 died and 8 others were wounded, all Catholics. The Irrawaddy News reported the military immediately removed the dead bodies. The roof, ceiling and the cross of the church were damaged. More than 300 people from at least 60 families had taken refuge in the church compound due to the fighting over the weekend between the military and an anti-coup resistance group known as the Karenni People's Defense Force, PDF. Father Soe Neng, a spokesperson for Loiko Diocese, said all those sheltering in the church had fled by the time church officials checked the damaged building on May 24th morning. He said thousands of people have taken refuge at churches, priests' centers and nuns' convents because they thought they were safe. He explained to Yukha News, saying the church is responding to humanitarian assistance, but it's a challenge for us as the number of internally displaced persons is increasing as a result of more fighting. Catholics took to social media to condemn the church attack. Fighting is also raging in ethnic areas such as Karen, Kachin and Chin states, which have large Christian populations, as the military steps up its offensive against ethnic guerrillas and anti-coup resistance groups by deploying fighter jets and heavy artillery. Kachin is home to about 116,000 Catholics among a population of 1.7 million. Around 10,000 people have been displaced in Kachin, while more than 42,000 have been displaced in Karen State, and thousands have fled Mindat town in Chin State due to hostilities that have escalated since May the 12th, according to the latest UN report. Myanmar has been in turmoil since the February 1st military coup that ousted the elected government and detained its leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Protests and a civil disobedience campaign of strikes against the coup have paralyzed parts of the country. I am Robin Gomes.
In the Holy Land, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken began a visit to the Middle East on Tuesday following an Egypt-brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. As Lydia O'Kane reports, the high-level U.S. visit to Israel seeks to solidify the cessation in hostilities.
It's been just over 2 weeks since hostilities broke out between Israel and Hamas, which wrought death and destruction on both sides. Touching down in Israel on Tuesday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken hoped to reinforce a ceasefire brokered by Egypt. The recent violence has devastated the Gaza Strip, and it is also hoped that the U.S. Secretary's mission will help speed up humanitarian aid to the Palestinian enclave. U.S. President Joe Biden said Blinken would meet with Israeli leaders about our ironclad commitment to Israel's security, as well as looking to restore ties with the Palestinians. As part of his visit, Mr. Blinken was due to visit Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, Cairo and Amman, with the primary focus on maintaining the ceasefire. Included on the Secretary of State's agenda are talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem and a meeting in the West Bank city of Ramallah with Mahmoud Abbas. Hostilities in the region were triggered by Israeli police raids on the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem and tensions with Palestinians during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Hamas began cross-border rocket attacks on Israel on May the 10th, prompting a barrage of Israeli airstrikes. At least 253 people were killed in Gaza and more than 1,900 wounded, while the Israeli military put the death toll in Israel at 13, with hundreds treated for injuries. By the time the ceasefire was announced, residential tower blocks and private houses across the Gaza Strip were damaged or destroyed. On Saturday, the UN Security Council issued a statement on the violence, calling for a full adherence to the ceasefire. I'm Lydia O'Kane.
Briefly, in Peru, a group of militants have killed at least 16 people, including 2 children, in a remote region which produces massive amounts of cocaine. Peruvian military authorities say the Shining Path militants were seeking to discourage people from voting in the upcoming presidential election slated for June 6th. Mali's interim vice president said Tuesday that he had seized power after the transitional president and prime minister failed to consult him about the formation of a new government. Colonel Assimi Goita said elections would be held next year as planned. Mali's president and prime minister were arrested and taken to a military base outside the capital on Monday evening. And finally, the Vatican and the Vatican and the United Kingdom have long enjoyed a good working relationship centered around a variety of topics. The most recent expression of good ties came today as a high-level British MP conducted a visit to the Dicastery for Communication. Lord Ahmad of Wimbledon, the Minister of State for South Asia and the Special Representative on Preventing Sexual Abuse in Conflict, says his Vatican visit has focused on safeguarding media freedom and the freedom of religion. Lord Ahmad told me about the importance of conserving media freedom in all parts of the globe.
Well, when we look around and we see media freedom and indeed the freedom of journalists to report, you don't need to go further than the current conflicts we're facing. Often the first victim of any conflict is media freedom, where you see journalists' rights being usurped, where you see media freedom or indeed journalists being targeted, agencies being shut down, newspapers being shut down. You can be absolutely sure that other human rights abuses are also taking place. Now, 2 years ago, the United Kingdom, along with Canada, launched what was known as the International Media Freedom Coalition, a global coalition to stand up for the rights of journalists. Now, as a person in public life, as a politician, the media is not always our best friend, but it's important that we stand up for the rights for journalists to exercise their media freedom and then report freely on situations around the world. And in this regard, on your specific issue of the Vatican, your communications that you have, your different channels you have, the languages in which you operate, again, are demonstrable about the importance to communicate to people.
You spent many years in the banking financial sector in the city. How can the financial sector and banks work to prevent sexual violence in conflict?
Well, I think the whole essence, what do banks do? Banks are often the lifeblood of any economy. They're the backbone of strengthening economies, and they have a role to play in terms of responsible lending, to looking at their own lending book to see who are they lending to, what are the supply chains of those corporates they lend to. So it's not just an issue of one element within the broad range of human rights. It's important that corporates that work, the banks that support those corporates, also look at their respective supply chains. So whether it's tackling those who abuse and cause issues of sexual violence and conflict, but equally those who abuse, and we call out egregious abuse of human rights, that those are called out. But it's important also, it's not just a government responsibility, it's not just a church responsibility, it's the responsibility of everyone in society, and the business community have an important role to play.
Thanks there to Lord Ahmad of Wimbledon, British Minister of State for South Asia. That brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. For more on these and other stories, go to our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. There you can also find all of our broadcasts in podcast form. Many thanks go to our sound engineers in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Devin Watkins.